Good evening. My name is Tina Sursted, and I'm a proud member of the League of Women Voters, Dakota County, and I would like to welcome you to the Dakota County Attorney Candidate Forum this evening. As always at our events, we want to remind you that the League of Women Voters, Dakota County is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences policy through education and advocacy. We never endorse parties or candidates. And now, let me introduce our moderator tonight, Lynn Lewis. Lynn is a trained moderator, an active member of the League, and a co-chair of the Voter Service Committee. We're honored to have Lynn moderating our forum tonight.
Good evening. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Dakota County, I'd like to welcome you to the Dakota County Attorney Primary Candidate Forum. Thank you to the candidates for attending tonight. Would also like to thank Eagan Community TV for their willingness to record and broadcast this event. Because this is a countywide election, we are also appreciative of the other community TV stations who will be broadcasting this forum in their service areas. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose a political party or candidate for office. League of Women Voters Dakota County provides unbiased candidate and information that is used by Minnesota voters regardless of their political beliefs. Sponsorship of this forum is a public service, providing you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss important issues face to face. The views expressed here are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. Sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the League of any particular candidate. As a reminder, this forum is for the primary election for Dakota County Attorney. The two candidates who receive the most votes in the August primary will move on to the general election in November. The winner of that election will become the Dakota County Attorney. We will start the candidate forum with opening statements. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for their opening statement and 2 minutes for their closing statement. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order, beginning with Kathy Keena, then proceeding to Elizabeth Lamin, Matt Little, and ending with Jeff Sheridan. Closing statements will be in random order. The order of answering questions will be rotated so that each candidate has an opportunity to respond in a different order. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions. We ask that candidates respect these time limits. Please note our timekeeper, Thana Ross, who has a yellow 15-second sign. There is also a stop sign that indicates you should conclude your sentence so we can move on to the next candidate. Many of the questions for this evening were submitted to the League by email. They were reviewed by a committee of League members and edited for clarity. In addition, this committee developed some questions on topics of interest that they identified in the community. Because of time constraints, we're not able to ask all the questions submitted. The forum will conclude in an hour. So let's begin now with opening statements. The order for opening statements will be Kathy Keena, Elizabeth Lamin, Matt Little, and Jeff Sheridan. Kathy, you can begin.
Thank you, Lynn. Hello, my name is Kathy Keena, and I currently have the honor of serving as the Dakota County Attorney. I started with the Dakota County Attorney's Office in 2000, initially as a line prosecutor in the Criminal Division. After 5 years, I transferred to the Civil Division, where I represented the county in civil litigation and provided legal services to numerous county departments and joint powers boards. In 2013, I was promoted to the position of Criminal Division Head. In 2019, I was promoted to the position of Chief Deputy. And in May 2021, I was unanimously appointed by the Dakota County Board of Commissioners as the Dakota County Attorney to fill out the term of Jim Backstrom. My public service career includes working as a public defender in Alexandria, Minnesota, followed by my service in the Lyon County Attorney's Office in Marshall, Minnesota for 7 years, 5 of those as the Lyon County Attorney. I've lived in Hastings for over 21 years with my husband of 32 years, and we have one adult daughter. I'm running for county attorney because I've devoted 22 years of my life serving the residents of this county in the county attorney's office. I have the depth and breadth of experience to lead a staff of nearly 100 employees to effectively carry out the duties of the county attorney, which are many. My key priority is to continue protecting public safety by prosecuting crime in a fair and just manner, to hold people accountable for the crimes that they commit, and to ensure that the rights of victims are safeguarded. In protecting public safety, I will continue to collaborate with stakeholders to reduce criminal justice involvement with those living with a mental illness and/or a substance use disorder. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's move to Elizabeth.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Lamin, and I'm running for Dakota County Attorney. I, along with my family, fled the former Soviet Union because of religious and political persecution in 1979. We came to Minnesota, and I am the product of the success that this country can offer. And in return, I have devoted my life to public service and pursuing justice. I left Russia, an oppressive, arbitrary, and corrupt regime. And I want the opposite, a system that is fair, rational, professional, and accountable. I grew up in St. Paul, and my family moved to Dakota County in 1990, and my parents still live in their home in Mendota Heights today. I've been a frontline prosecutor for over 16 years. I went to law school at the University of Minnesota after working with battered women for two years in Winona, Minnesota. I began my career as a line prosecutor in Stearns County, handling a whole variety of cases, including domestic violence. I've been at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, it'll be 15 years next month, handling mostly complex homicides and shootings. Through that role, I have developed strong relationships with criminal justice partners, such as police, probation, and community members. I'm someone who does not back down and advocates for victims and families. This campaign is a culmination of my professional career. I'm able to bring experience working in a prosecutor's office along with a fresh perspective to the Dakota County Attorney's Office. I want to work to stop the revolving door by addressing the underlying issues and root causes through prioritizing treatment courts, such as drug court and veterans court. This will help prioritize resources to focus on violent crime. I will bring my collaborative and smart on crime approach. As a Dakota County attorney, I can hit the ground running on the first day because of my extensive experience along with my fresh perspective that together we can make Dakota County a safe place for everyone to live and raise a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now we'll go to Matt Little.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this forum on and for those viewing it, doing their part to make our democracy a little bit better. My name is Matt Little. I'm the former two-term mayor of Lakeville. I'm also the former state senator for Southern Dakota County. Married to my wife, Coco. We met at law school. I also went to the University of Minnesota. Most importantly, though, I am Poppy's dad. She turns 3 next month, and we're having a truck party that she's very excited about. I'm running because I think she deserves a better world than this, and I know you feel that way too about your family. It seems like our country is falling apart. Our democracy hangs in the balance. Every time I turn on the TV, there's another shooting, another mass shooting, shootings in our schools, and we need to do something about it. I've been disappointed that the county attorney's office has been silent on these recent shootings and has taken no action to reduce gun violence in Dakota County. If elected county attorney, that will change. I will prosecute straw person purchasers. I will take every threat seriously, and I will keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers and violent felons. I'll continue to be a strong advocate for background checks, red flag laws, and a ban on assault rifles. But the county attorney's office can do so much more. We can turn back the dangerous trends on violent crime and go after dealers of hard drugs who are killing our friends, our family, and neighbors. We can make sure every child is safe in their own home. We can protect seniors from fraud and abuse. We can end cycles of violence and make sure that every sexual assault allegation is heard investigated and prosecuted accordingly. We can reduce juvenile crime and get kids on a better path. We can have a veterans court right here in Dakota County. We'll shift our focus away from marijuana and end criminalization of poverty. We can do all that and more. My name is Matt Little, and I'm running for Dakota County Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And now we'll turn to Jeff Sheridan. Jeff?
Thank you and good evening. My name is Jeff Sheridan. I am a lawyer in private practice and have been practicing here in Dakota County now for 35 years. I am also a co-owner of a small business, the Sheridan and Dulas Law Firm. For more on my biography and on me, you can go to my campaign website at jeffsheridan.org. In the 35 years that I have been representing humans, individuals and families in Dakota County, many of them have been at the pointy end of everything that the county attorney's office has prosecuted. Literally thousands of clients that I've dealt with over 35 years. And you can imagine in that time I have probably arrived at some conclusions about which policies I think work and which don't, and the ability to distinguish between those two things. My practice has put me in the direct path of everything that the Dakota County Attorney's Office does. I have very different ideas about the way that we can advance the safety, health, and welfare of the members of this community, a community that I have called home for that entire 35 years. My wife, Melissa, and I live in Lakeville. We have 2 adult children, and one of them and my grandchildren also live in this community. I think everybody on this dais will tell you the same thing, and that is that they're interested in public safety. But each of us has a different approach as to how we think we can accomplish that. And I thank you for taking the time to be with us here this evening so that you can learn about the different approaches that each of us might take in this office. I haven't applied for a job in 35 years until tonight.
Thank you, candidates. Now let's proceed to questions. The response order for the first question will be Matt, Jeff, Elizabeth, and Kathy. And the first question is, with public safety a major issue with voters, what will you do to ensure public safety, and how will you communicate with residents that public safety is a priority? Matt?
Thank you. Public safety is the #1 priority of the county attorney. I think people have to be held accountable when they commit a crime, and it can't be so easy to be arrested, bail out, and continue to recommitting crimes. So people have to be held accountable, and they have to be held accountable as swiftly as possible. But the only way that we're going to achieve public safety through the county attorney's office is if we have proper staffing to do that. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. From 2018 till now, in one of the fastest growing counties in Minnesota, the county attorney's office actually has 0.87 fewer full-time employees. So that is going to cause backlogs, and that's going to cause cases to fall through the cracks. When I was the mayor of Lakeville, every single year I was mayor of Lakeville, we were able to get our police department additional resources so that they could protect the citizens of our community, and we were able to do a whole host of things. Reduce overtime hours. We even had our own crime lab, online crime labs for a while, and so that's what we need. We need the proper funding, and that's the experience I can bring. I can convince the county board that public safety is the #1 priority of this office and of the county board, so that we can protect people.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Jeff?
Thank you. Let me say this, that if we're truly interested in public safety, the first thing we need to do is stop doing the things that we know don't work. For 50 plus years now, we have bought into this tough on crime. What we need are more cops, we need more prosecutors, we need more prison cells. And what we've managed to accomplish in that time is that the United States of America currently holds the record of having the largest number of incarcerated people per capita in the world. in the world, all right? So we have to come, and despite that, our crime rates continue to rise. We have to appreciate and we have to be able to stop the things that aren't working. When you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. We need to take that advice to heart because we are making things worse. This is not about can we get you to the judge and get the judge to bang the gavel and give you a nice long sentence. We need to shift the focus of the way we are prosecuting people to start looking at the disposition of every criminal case and ask the question, how do we make sure that this disposition on this day is going to be the last time that this person stands in front of a judge charged with a crime? And until we change the focus to that question, we will never move the needle on public safety.
Thank you, Jeff. Elizabeth?
Thank you. I've been a frontline prosecutor for over 16 years. I've sat with hundreds of victims of crimes, everything from obviously domestic assault to homicide, families who are suffering and in pain. And I can talk about that. Public safety, people need to not only be safe, but feel safe. And we need to do a much better job of reaching out to the communities. Make sure we have strong relationships with all the different communities in Dakota County. We also need to be transparent about our work, assess what we're doing, and is it having the correct results. The correct results is we want to diminish crime. We want to be responsive to the victims that we serve, recognize that violent crime hurts not just the immediate victims, but also the entire community, and then work to help repair that harm. And so I think there's no one answer. We have to prioritize the cases we're going to work on. We have to make sure that we are not overly criminalizing substance disorder and mental health. And treatment courts is an important way to do that and to help stop that revolving door. And then we need to focus on the very serious crimes and how to address the crime and the harm done to the community, how to repair that harm, and how to make sure we both hold someone accountable and address future safety needs for the entire community.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Kathy?
Thank you. So I would like to start by giving everybody a little reality check on crime in Dakota County. Dakota County has not had the same experience in violent crime as our neighboring counties have, of Hennepin and Ramsey. In 2021, we charged 1,868 felony level cases. That was down from 2,118 cases that we charged in 2020. We had no carjackings in 2021. We haven't had any carjackings yet this year. So I understand the concern with public safety, and it is a concern, especially in our neighboring communities where many of us travel to. In our office, we do prosecute crimes of violence very, very aggressively, but that isn't necessarily the solution for public safety. We have to look at other solutions. And that includes, I think, addressing issues or people that are dealing with mental health and or substance use disorders. And we really need to look upstream and where can we intercept those people before they have justice involvement. And that's what I want to focus on, and if I had more time, I would share with you some of the things that the county is currently doing in that regard.
Thank you, Kathy. The response order for the second question is going to be Elizabeth, Kathy, Jeff, and Matt. And the second question is, though the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission recommended eliminating a policy of longer sentences for crimes committed while on probation, their recommendation was tabled. Do you or do you not support the recommendation, and why? Elizabeth?
Let me give a brief explanation of the sentencing guidelines. They're grids, and they are established. The legislature empowers the Sentencing Guidelines Commission, which is composed of people from the community, and people from the criminal justice system to then outline what are the general guidelines when someone commits a felony. Well, the issue and dispute is the fact that when someone commits a felony, you look at someone's criminal history score to determine where they fall on these grids based on the type of crime they committed and their prior criminal history background, what other prior crimes they have. And so recently there was a debate about if someone is currently on probation, if that should count as an additional point or not. And I'm in the position that I would do whatever the sentencing guidelines ultimately decides, because I think the job of the county attorney is to enforce the laws and to enforce the standards that is set out by the community. I think there is some value in recognizing someone who commits another crime while they are on probation. And so I think that it is important to take that into account. That's something that I'm seeing a lot as well currently, is that people who are released on bail, for instance, are committing additional offenses. And that is something that I think we need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Kathy?
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Lamin is correct. What that is referring to is what's called a custody status point. So you can earn 1 point if you commit a crime while you're on probation or on supervised release from prison. And I fully support that. I think if you are currently on probation or supervised release and you fail to remain law-abiding, that should be recognized as a factor in what your sentence should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you. Let me say this, as I indicated in my opening statement, the issue is an issue of mass incarceration. We have, as I indicated, the highest number of individuals per capita incarcerated in the world. So when the Sentencing Guideline Commission made this recommendation, it was with an eye toward, are we going to do something about this? Are we going to try to reduce the number of incarcerated people we have today? I too agree that there is accountability, or there needs to be accountability in the system. But every time somebody commits a probation violation, there is at least 2 people involved who have failed. Both the person charged with a crime, who's now committed a new offense, but there was also the person who was assigned by the judge to supervise that person and try to help them conform their behavior to a behavior that is acceptable in society. So there are a minimum of 2 failures. And so when we talk about accountability, I always find when everyone wants to talk about personal accountability, it's always somebody else's accountability they want to talk about. But the fact is that when somebody violates probation, there should be accountability all the way around, not just for the individual who we knew at the outset had some problems conforming their behavior with what we expect in society. They need the help, and they didn't get it.
Thank you, Jeff. Matt?
Thanks. The reason it was pulled is the proposal was pulled from being recommended and also passed is because of partisan politics. The Republican Party at the legislature was looking for a talking point to say Democrats were against public safety, and they were using this as a talking point. And it's really the problem with where our politics are at right now. These incredibly life-changing, system-changing recommendations are boiled down to a yes or no question. When in reality, I think the issue can be split, which is if you are on probation for a violent crime, yes, I think that should be taken into account, and you should have a longer sentence if you commit another crime of violence. But for low-level offenses, based on addiction, no, I don't. You're obviously struggling to get yourself out of that and your life back, and we should be working to help you out of that. But I think our partisan politics right now is making real solutions a problem when we should be parsing the issue.
Thank you, Matt. Now we'll turn to the 3rd question, and the response order will be Jeff, Matt, Kathy, and Elizabeth. And the third question is, what approaches would you take towards ending violence against women, inclusive of, but not limited to, sexual assault, murder, domestic violence, and hate crimes? Jeff?
Thank you for that question. First and foremost, we would prosecute any crime involving domestic violence. That is just a given at the outset. My concern is that the laws that we have with regard to domestic violence, while they do address the moment of the violence, they don't really do much to address how we got here, how violence in the household began. And so one of the things I think that I would try to focus on is this. We know there are 4 primary drivers of violence in this country, and at the top of the list of things that drive violence in this country is exposure to violence. And sadly, for most children or for most young people, that exposure to violence begins in the home. And often at the hands of their people who purportedly love them. I will tell you that the one thing that I have seen almost universally through the people I have represented charged with these crimes is that all of them were victims of assaults themselves, primarily starting in the form of corporal punishment. And I think we need to take a hard look at that and decide whether or not it's okay to hit the people we love in the household, because trust me, they're learning at the hands of their own parents. So that's something I would focus on.
Thank you, Jeff. Matt?
Thank you for this question. I do think it's probably one of the most important questions we'll get this evening. Violence against women is a serious, long-standing problem, and the cycles of violence against women have continued throughout our history, and that is why I mention it in the opening as a priority. When I was in the state Senate, I had a bill that required each police department to investigate a sexual assault allegation, because how many times have we read the stories that a lot of these allegations aren't even investigated? And how many times have we had close friends tell us those stories? And I'm kind of sick of hearing those stories. We need to investigate it when someone makes an allegation, and as I said in the opening, I'll investigate it and prosecute it accordingly. But the other thing we can do right in the county attorney's office is aggressively prosecute things like conditions of release or probation violations. Mr. Sheridan's not wrong that the biggest precursor to violence is previous violence. And so we need to hold those people accountable. And if you are continuing to abuse people in your life, you need to go to jail. It's as simple as that. But we're also not going to solve everything in the courtroom. There's a lot of intersections in terms of housing and income support so that people can leave domestic abuse situations that we need to solve.
Thank you, Matt. Kathy?
Our office currently aggressively prosecutes crimes against women: sexual assault, domestic abuse, and domestic violence homicides. And they are some of the most difficult cases to prosecute, especially the domestic abuse cases, because we often are dealing with a person, a victim, who may potentially recant, and oftentimes does recant. And you still have to be willing to try and go forward with those cases, knowing that, and getting and gathering additional evidence to prosecute those cases. When we do prosecute those cases, we want to ensure that there are orders for protection, DANCOs, domestic abuse no contact orders, that are entered prohibiting the offender, alleged offender, from having contact with the victim. We want to take guns away from those abusers so that they don't come back and violate the protection order and end up killing the victim. We also then want to try to wrap services around not only the victim, but also the children that may be involved. And that involves getting our victim witness unit to provide services. That may be getting 360 communities involved to provide those services. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Elizabeth?
Thank you. This is an important issue, as others have mentioned. We need to start looking at this a little bit more holistically and victim-centered. We also need to recognize that, especially in domestic violence situations, when victims report cases and the criminal justice system is involved, that's actually the most dangerous time for victims. And so when women recant, that's understandable. We need to look for where are the gaps in the system. And this is where a fresh perspective of someone who's had many years of experience prosecuting these cases comes in, right? We need to build the relationships with the criminal justice partners. We can't order anyone to do the investigation. We build the relationships with the police, with the victim advocates, to make sure to figure out where are the gaps, where are we missing the cases. In terms of sexual assaults, it's not uncommon for sexual assaults maybe to be reported to hospitals, but not to police. Maybe to police, but then not to county attorney's office. And that's what we want to, again, take a fresh look. Where is it that we are missing these cases? What do we need to do to fill those holes? How do we train all of our partners? How do we train the community and reach out to the community? And we should look at also domestic violence courts that generally focus on victim safety. This is an area that we can dramatically improve, and I think if we work together, we can make Dakota County much safer.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The response order for the fourth question will be Kathy, Elizabeth, Jeff, and Matt. And the fourth question is, there are initiatives in Minnesota to reduce the risk of violent encounters between police and civilians, such as eliminating traffic stops for minor infractions. How would you, as county attorney, reduce this risk in Dakota County?
You know, the Dakota County experience where we see more of the risk is actually in situations where officers are called out to a crisis. Someone's having a mental health crisis, and before you know it, they're just a threat to themselves, but then the police arrive and the situation escalates, and pretty soon the person's shooting guns out at, firing at the officers, and SWAT team shows up. We don't want that. So one of the things that Dakota County has implemented is when someone calls 911 with a crisis call, that call is no longer given to law enforcement if it's just the person who's potentially a harm to themselves. Instead, that call then gets routed to a crisis worker who then handles that call. If necessary, there might be a co-response where a social worker and a police officer go out to the location. But that doesn't happen very often. Most of them are wrapped up with the crisis social worker. The other thing that Dakota County has done then is they are embedding social workers into 10 of the 12 law enforcement agencies in Dakota County to then have that social worker follow up with the person that called crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's go to Elizabeth.
Thank you. I think we need to reach out to all the varying communities in Dakota County. Dakota County is the third largest county in the state. We're growing more and more diverse. We need to build long-lasting relationships with all the different communities. We need to talk to them and see what are their needs, what are they experiencing, and what we can do to help allay some of their fears. We also, I think, need to look at the numbers, right? We don't want to go just based on an anecdote or an experience. We want to really address and be very practical about it. We want police to be documenting who they're stopping and for what. And then we also want to work and have good relationships both with law enforcement and all the different communities to be able to bring them together and to help do some significant retraining. The issue around minor traffic stops is the legislature sets the rules in terms of what are the laws to be followed. and it is the job of the police to enforce the rules. Now, the manner in which they enforce the rules and the guidance they receive and the support they have from the community and their understanding about it is important. We need to make sure that they are fairly and justly enforcing those rules. We need to work with them to train them, and we want to address real fears that different communities have to ensure that there's de-escalation as opposed to escalation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's go to Jeff.
Thank you. The issues that arise here generally arise out of these, and back to the question about minor traffic stops, and should they be abolished to end this cycle of violence. I understand the concern. I also understand why the police want to conduct the traffic stops, because maybe they'll find an impaired driver, or maybe they'll find somebody who's got a warrant out for the arrest. So I understand the desire to do that. The problem is that it feeds into the greater problem that we have, which is sort of the criminalization of property, or of poverty, because the people who are getting stopped are the people who have the lower end cars that where the lights aren't all working and those sorts of things. And those people are the people who can least afford the encounter with the police, because maybe they're late for work, or if they had the time to fix the light, they'd have fixed the light. So I'm concerned to the extent that practice is further advancing the criminalization of poverty in our state. One of the things that has occurred to me is that we have these clinics where people can go to the fire station and get their a lesson on how to put their car seat in their car when they have children. Why don't we have similar clinics where you could go to an auto parts store and have a police officer or a firefighter change a light bulb for you, and maybe reduce the number of these stops and the potential for these conflicts altogether.
Thank you, Jeff. Matt?
Thank you. I've already begun this work long before I sat at this table, which is in the legislature. I was the author of a bill to create the SMART Center right here in Dakota County, which trains law enforcement on how to handle mental health crisis situations, to reduce violent encounters with people who are in crisis. In addition to that, we banned deadly chokeholds that we've seen happening nationally. And we also created a duty to intervene for officers that see another officer doing something wrong. So all three of those things are already helping. In terms of the tabs and civil property enforcement, I agree that the legislature needs to eliminate that. Pulling someone over for a tab fee is more of a civil matter than a criminal matter. And it does criminalize poverty. No one wants to drive around with a broken windshield or a broken taillight. No one wants to drive without insurance. No one wants to drive with expired tabs. No one wants to do those things. If people have the means, they pay for those things. And so we need to end the criminalization of poverty, and I'll continue to be a strong advocate at the legislature using the voice box of this position to do so.
Thank you, Matt. The response order for the fifth question will be Matt, Jeff, Kathy, and Elizabeth. And the fifth question is, research shows that racial disparities in the Minnesota criminal justice system cannot be attributed to crime commission rates alone. As Dakota County Attorney, how would you work to eliminate those disparities? Matt?
Thank you. And I'll repeat what I said earlier. We're not going to be able to solve everything in the courtroom. Disparities start with housing and finances and education and food support and all those things. Now, the way that the county attorney's office can help is changing how we prosecute drug laws, and namely how we prosecute marijuana. As you stated in the question, the research shows that young black men are arrested, charged, and convicted of marijuana crimes at significantly higher rates than white counterparts, even though the use of marijuana is equal among all races and all people. And so if I was elected to the county attorney office, we would shift our focus away from prosecution of marijuana Anything that is 1 pound or less, I would not charge a felony. It would be a petty misdemeanor. And if it was 2 ounces or less, I wouldn't even issue a ticket. We've got to shift our focus away from marijuana. The other way we can restore some justice in our nation is if we use the expungement powers of the county attorney. You can agree to expunge certain crimes, and we need to go back and look at folks that have these felonies for low-level drug possessions, and we need to expunge them so they can get their lives back, they can get housing, and they can get a job. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Jeff.
So, at the risk of agreeing with one of my opponents, I will I will say that in the arena of drugs, and we've seen it time and time again, that is the area where these disparities are most visible. And frankly, we're killing ourselves with marijuana crimes in this state. I mean, everybody knows that sooner or later marijuana is going to be legalized in the state of Minnesota. The only question is how much damage are we going to do to our young people, to our poor people, our people of color, while we're waiting around for that to happen. You know, I think of this as, you know, as we send kids off to college, you know, and most people don't know that any conviction for a drug crime is going to result in ineligibility for young people to get federal financial aid for college. So when we send our kids off to Stanford who get into Stanford, and the kid from Colorado gets into Stanford, and the kid from Minnesota gets into Stanford, and the kid from Colorado has no conviction because marijuana is legal in marijuana, and the kid from Minnesota is not going to be eligible for financial aid, and he's going to not be able to enjoy that experience. We are ruining the lives of our youth, of our people of color, and of our poor people all over the thing that we all agree is sooner or later going to be legal, and then we're going to have to go through all the expense and all of the effort to try to expunge all of these convictions from their records. So first step is stop prosecuting marijuana crimes.
Thank you, Jeff. Kathy?
You know, I guess when I get that question, I always wonder, well, what are all of us going to do about eliminating the racial disparities in the criminal justice system? Because as my two opponents have just indicated, there's more to it than that. And again, what are we going to do upstream to prevent people becoming justice involved? And recognizing that this is particularly an issue with drug prosecutions, back in March of 2020, unlike Hennepin and Ramsey County, all the other counties in the state of Minnesota have to prosecute gross misdemeanor drug offenses. And in our office, that constituted approximately 300 cases a year. In March of 2020, our office stopped prosecuting gross misdemeanor drug cases. After I became county attorney, I created a pretrial drug diversion program for low-level drug offenders. I also, in some other areas, I relaxed some of the restrictions on our adult diversion program for low-level property offenders to allow increased participation. And our office doesn't prosecute a lot of marijuana cases. I was just looking at our stats from last year, and we only prosecuted 25 felony cases, marijuana cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Elizabeth?
I think these answers show that we need to look at the actual numbers, right? It's easy for us to kind of talk in general terms, but it's really important to look at what is the office really doing. And as Kathy said, if they're only prosecuting 25 felony marijuana cases, the racial disparities are not coming from there. And so we need to provide practical solutions. We need to honestly look at what are the racial statistics of the cases being referred, what is the stops of all the different law enforcement jurisdiction, how is it being filtered, and then what is the county attorney's office doing? And again, as someone with frontline experience and a fresh perspective, we can actually take this opportunity to really re-examine our procedures and look at the facts and numbers and make sure that we find areas to address those. It might not be in marijuana prosecution. It might be in different areas. And so this would be the time to do that. And I think that if we're honest about where we're starting from and also the experience of working within the criminal justice system, that it's not easy to just pull one lever and get an exact result. And so I think me being able to bring both the strong relationships within the criminal justice system and the fresh perspective to really look at and start addressing racial disparities.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The response order for the 6th question is Elizabeth, Kathy, Matt, and Jeff. And the 6th question is, would you consider eliminating cash bail in Dakota County? Why or why not? Elizabeth?
That's a great question. Cash bail is outlined in our Constitution. Even if any of us here wanted to or would talk about it, that's not actually something we can do. As the prosecutor, we can request different amounts of bail, but it's the court that sets the bail, and it's written in the Constitution that cash bail is required for all cases. Here's an example. Typically, we think about cash bail and what it does to poor people and low-level crimes, and it's true. Cash bail can be very destructive for people who commit low-level crimes and are forced to stay in jail for even nominal bail. But cash bail also works in reverse. I have a case where I'm prosecuting someone for first-degree premeditated murder, and because this particular individual comes from a wealthy family, was able to post bail and walk out of jail within 24 hours of the indictment. And so that's where cash bail doesn't even hold the most dangerous people in custody. The purpose of keeping people in custody while they are awaiting their trial is to make sure that they're not hurting others in the community or themselves, and they're not committing additional crime, and they're going to come back. And so I think it's for the legislature to really look at if it's appropriate to change cash bail, but it's not working on either end right now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Kathy?
Thank you. Bail reform is needed, and in what form it takes, I'm not certain. 70% nationally, 70% of jail population, including Dakota County, is comprised of people who are awaiting trial. And our office currently doesn't request bail in every felony case that we prosecute. 50% of the complaints that we issue go out as summons, so they're mailed to the person and they are to voluntarily appear in court. We don't request bail in those cases. And we don't necessarily request bail in cases on people that are in custody and that we charge while they're in custody. So what needs to happen? And I think for reform to occur, there has to be a change to the Constitution, because the Constitution currently provides, as Ms. Lamin said, that a defendant has the right to bail. And I would strongly encourage our legislators to look at the New Jersey model, which eliminated cash bail, but has a provision that for what are considered people who really do pose a threat to public safety, that they can be held without bail. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Matt?
Thank you. I did want to correct the record a little bit on disparities. We don't have to look for the numbers. We don't have to wait for the numbers. We know the numbers and we know the research. From the beginning, when the war on drugs was created, disparities among people of color have occurred at significant amounts. So we don't have to wait for the numbers to know that the way we're prosecuting our drug crimes is a main driver of disparities. But going back to cash bail, there was a recent study by the University of Pennsylvania that showed they eliminated cash bail for 12 felony offenses, low-level nonviolent felony offenses, and they saw no change in people showing up to court. So I think some of the results speak for themselves. If I was elected county attorney, we would eliminate cash bail for some low-level nonviolent offenses, because it does create another disparity between people who have money and people who do not. Let's say you're guilty but you have money, and you're not guilty but you don't have money. The guilty person gets out and can put up a legal defense. The other person may plead because they want to get out of jail and they want to get back to their job and family as quickly as possible, and that's just not right.
Thank you, Matt. Jeff?
Thank you. This phrase "cash bail" is kind of a catchphrase, and it is a bit of a misnomer with regard to what bail really is. The purpose of bail, understanding that everyone who's charged with a crime is presumed to be innocent, is that they shouldn't be held in jail before they're actually convicted of a crime. The purpose, the proper purpose of bail, is to put up some level of surety to make sure that the person is going to appear and ultimately face their accusers in court. So bail has a particular purpose. Bail, as it's used in Minnesota, and I would argue as it's used in Dakota County, is used, in my view, in abusive ways. It's to gain leverage in settlement negotiations. It's used to get people who of modest means who post bail magically in the amount of the fine that their offense carries, together with maybe the cost of restitution. Magically, that's the number of the bail, so that if the person doesn't show up, then they're just convicted and the bail is forfeited to pay the fine. Or worse yet, the bail isn't enough to cover all the fine, and then we begin the cycle of warrants for failing to appear, and again, further criminalize poverty. There's an appropriate use of bail, and that is to secure the appearance of the presumed innocent person to show up for their trial. Anything beyond that is inappropriate and would not be used if I'm elected to this office.
Thank you, Jeff. And that now brings us to closing statements. Candidates will have 2 minutes. The response order will be Matt, Jeff, Kathy, and Elizabeth. Matt?
Well, thank you again to the League for putting this forum on. Truly appreciate this opportunity, and again, thank you to the viewer for making it through the full hour. The question that I think voters should be asking themselves is who can make the change that all of us are talking about, and who can bring about the results on safety and justice that all of us are talking about. I don't mean this with any offense, but if after 22 years, the changes that we're talking about tonight haven't been made, they're not going to be made next year. I've served this community for a decade as a city councilor, a mayor, and a state senator, and I've had proven results despite terrible environments. As the mayor of Lakeville, I came in and it was a negative and toxic environment, work environment. Based on the previous administration, we were able to change that around and get people working in the same vein. And that's why you're seeing such success in Lakeville, and it's now the largest city in Dakota County, where as mayor I managed hundreds of employees and a budget of over $40 million. In the state Senate, I was able to take on hyper-partisanship and get things done for accessibility and make sure seniors and those with disabilities can stay in their home. I took on the gun lobby and advocated for background checks and red flag laws. And in the history of the Senate, I'm the only person that has ever gotten Republicans to sign on to a background check bill. Also made sure people could insure their insulin and afford their insulin when I took on the pharmaceutical lobby. I'm here to represent and serve people and fight when necessary. So again, right now, we need an experienced leader, and that's what I can provide. My name is Matt Little, and I'm running to be your next Dakota County Attorney.
Thanks, Matt. Jeff?
Thank you. As I indicated in my opening, we've endured 50 plus years of the get tough on crime sort of mantra, the lock them up and throw away the key. The problem is that it fails to recognize reality, and the reality is that we do not throw away the key. An overwhelming majority of all people who get sentenced in our criminal justice system are going to return to the community where they offended. And so the question is, how are they going to return to that community? Are they going to return to that community as somebody with the tools and with the mindset to try to be successful in the community? Or are they going to return to the community in a way that people shun them, they treat them as pariahs, they're not going to rent to them, they're not going to give them jobs, they're not going to be eligible for any sort of programs? The one thing I've learned in 35 years of representing people is that people are incredibly adept at survival. And if we create a system where a person is cut off from all legitimate means of survival, they're only going to have illegitimate means left to their disposal. We wring our hands and we wonder how on earth can we stop this revolving door, this recidivism problem that we have. But we don't need to wring our hands. We need to look at what we're doing, and specifically what the county attorney is doing. Because the county attorney should enter into every negotiation in every case with a single question in mind, and that is, how do we make sure that first, people don't end up in this system in the first place, but primarily, how do we ensure that the people who do end up in this system, that this day in front of this judge is the last time that this person is ever going to stand in front of a judge. Everyone in the room needs to have that in mind as the end goal, and as your county attorney, I will bring that mindset to the courthouse.
Thank you, Jeff. Kathy?
Thank you. I wish to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum, and I wish to thank you, the voters who are watching it, to inform yourselves about the candidates for Dakota County Attorney. The work our office performs that is the most public-facing is our prosecution of felony-level offenses committed by adults, and that's all we've been talking about tonight. However, as county attorney, I'm responsible for many other legal duties that are equally important. For example, we prosecute all levels of offenses committed by juveniles in Dakota County. We ensure the rights of crime victims are safeguarded. We handle all appeals to any appellate courts. We administer several different adult and juvenile diversion programs. We represent the county in child protection and adult protection matters, including civil commitments. We provide child support enforcement services and paternity establishment, and we provide legal services to the Dakota County Board of Commissioners, county departments, and several joint powers organizations. As a county attorney, I am responsible for leading a staff of nearly 100 employees and managing a budget of $8.4 million to ensure that all those duties are performed and that they are performed well. Because of my dedication to public service in a county attorney's office, I have experience in every facet of the work that is performed by a county attorney's office. And equally important, I have the necessary management skills and leadership skills to carry the work of the office forward. This is my calling. This is not a position that I'm taking for a stepping stone. My leadership, in conjunction with the work performed by the dedicated professionals of the Dakota County Attorney's Office, contributes to making this county a premier county in which to live, work, and play. I humbly ask that you help keep it that way by voting to retain me as your county attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Elizabeth?
I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I want to thank all my other opponents and the other candidates, and you, the viewers. Thank you so much. I bring both extensive prosecutorial experience and the opportunity for a fresh perspective. After so many years of the same administration, it's time for a reset, to take a look at what is bringing practical results and areas that need improvement. Last May, I was raising the alarm bells that Dakota County was the only county in the metro area without a veterans court. I raised this to the county commissioners. That had never been raised before. I'm so glad that the county instituted a Veterans Court, started one, although I wish it was locally based. If best practices are followed, treatment courts are much more comprehensive and effective ways for addressing substance disorder and mental health. And they actually do help in stopping that revolving door. I've been prosecuting violent crime for 16 years, and I have seen the damage that it does to entire families for years and generations. Several years ago, I prosecuted a homicide where a father of several teenagers was murdered. Unfortunately, last fall, I then prosecuted the son for weapons charges. So not only the immediate family suffers, the entire community is harmed, and we need to do more about repairing that harm and stopping that violence. I'm currently tasked with leading a response to carjacking in Ramsey County, which involves coordinated approach, working with criminal justice partners, police, probation, and community organizations, and community and all the different communities, and also pursuing tough cases. I have the experience and the fresh pair of eyes to do the work of the county attorney. I will collect and routinely analyze data to determine what are the impacts of our policies, which ones are effective at providing community safety, and I hope that come August 9th, you vote for me for Dakota County Attorney. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The League of Women Voters Dakota County would like to thank everyone for participating in our forum. We'd especially like to thank our candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and for being willing to serve our community. The League of Women Voters also researches issues that are important to our members and to the health of our communities. If you're interested in finding out more about what we do and how you can make a difference, please visit us at lwvdakotacounty.org. You can find more information about voting and candidates at mnvotes.org and at Vote411. Again, thanks so much for viewing, and remember to vote by August 9th. Good night.